Day so far. Yeah. Absolutely incredible. And you were thinking it's not going to get any better. But I have news. It is going to get better. We have had an incredibly rich conversation so far today, and there are several things that stood out for me. The lessons that Ella Baker taught us, but also the brilliance, the compassion, and the love that Barbara has shared with so many of us. And so, this conference is about Ella Baker, but it's also very, very much about Barbara Ransby. I feel like I've kind of gotten to know a lot of you over the course of today. We have had over 1,000 people who've been watching us online. So thanks all of you who are out there participating virtually. And I just want to take a moment to say how I think through the course of the day, I've learned what a diverse group we have here gathered today in terms of age, in terms of ethnicity, language, race, in terms of your occupation or what you do in your life. And I just want to pay homage for a moment to the elders who are here, who and there are so many of you who we are all learning from, even if you're not up on stage. So thank you very much for all the work you've done, and for continuing to participate. And for the high school students and the teachers who've made the journey out today. And of course, all the students from Columbia, and I see a lot of them here. Welcome. We are so happy to have you. So it's a very special honor for me to introduce our keynote conversation, especially because Barbara Ransby and Angela Davis, both highly respected authors, activists, and public intellectuals, need no introduction, so it makes my job easy. But rather than reading their bios with their multiple awards and extensive publications and prestigious appointments, I'm actually just going to give an extended welcome, in part to frame the conversation. And I'd like to talk about the radical Black feminist tradition that they represent through their life's work and scholarly publications. Both Angela and Barbara have been crucial to crafting and helping us understand radical Black feminism, which has been at the forefront of imagining a more just world. And that tradition includes, as people have talked about earlier today, Robin Kelly talked about this, Deo Gore talked about this, but it includes a whole long list of Black feminists: Claudia Jones, June Jordan, Alice Walker, Eslanda Robeson, Mariam McCabe, and people who are here like Beverly Guy Shefdahl, and Barbara Smith, who was supposed to join us today and sadly could not be here. As the Combahee River Collective wrote nearly a half century ago, a Black feminist future, one crafted by the most marginalized, is rooted in a vision of an anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, anti-capitalist world. And it includes a long history of global solidarity, including with the people of Palestine. It is a vision that I, and I'm sure many of you, have learned from and continue to learn from. It was a politics that I first encountered through Barbara. I met Barbara when I was 18 years old. And and those of you who know her well know that once you're in her orbit, you never leave. She is a magnet. She's a magnet because of her brilliance, because of her organizing skills, and because she will never rest, right? I was an anti-apartheid activist in my high school in 1985. And as I was leaving for college to head to the University of Michigan, my teacher suggested that I reach out to Barbara. She had a reputation as a brilliant organizer, having led the South African anti-apartheid divestment movement here at Columbia in the early 80s, and then spearheading another campaign at Michigan. When I got to campus, I joined the Free South Africa Coordinating Committee and our multiracial collective, and there's many people here, Tracy Matthews, Kathy Cohen, who were a part of that movement, practiced group-centered leadership of women of color. And Derica was talking about going back in time and speed dial. We didn't have Twitter or Facebook, or we couldn't note cell phones. We didn't even have our own personal computers. We had to go to the lab because nobody had a personal computer. We held late night strategy sessions with Barbara's 1.5-year-old son, Jason, curiously meandering around the room in his diaper. It was a model of collective childcare, although the responsibility was carried largely by Barbara and her partner, Peter. And I never appreciated what it meant until I had my own kids. For Barbara to be 8 months pregnant and militantly confronting the Columbia administration, I didn't know her then, but I heard the stories, or to be leading a movement with a small child in tow. Perhaps it was because Jason was so easygoing, as he still is. But I think it also reflects ongoing questions that we all consider every day about what kind of risks we take, how much do we give, and what issues are worth standing up for. We walked picket lines together, we testified before the Board of Trustees, we took over the administration building, built shanties in the center of campus. Those were the makeshift dwellings that had come to symbolize apartheid settler colonial policies. And when they were burned down, we rebuilt them. We held our own alternative graduation ceremony to honor Nelson Mandela after the university refused to give him an honorary degree, labeling him a terrorist because of his embrace of armed struggle. We also came to understand, largely because of Barbara, that the movement to end apartheid in South Africa was inextricably tied to racism in the US and the ongoing struggles for liberation in El Salvador, Nicaragua, Angola, Palestine, and Puerto Rico. Our actions were coupled with knowledge and learning. We read and discussed the Combahee River Collective, Bell Hooks, Deborah King, Manning Marable, and Angela Davis. Barbara brought her own experience as a seasoned organizer and her research and writing about Ella Baker to our political work. The model of Ella Baker and her teachings about grassroots organizing were part of our daily conversations. We talked about collective movements, about political leadership of ordinary people, and the importance of structural change. Just as the student lunch counter sit-ins in the 1960s was, in Baker's words, bigger than a hamburger and even a giant-sized Coke, we came to see our struggle as bigger than the specific demands we were putting forth. In 1988, we started a student-run center, the Ella Baker Nelson Mandela Center for Anti-Racist Education. And the first director of that center, Tracy Matthews, is here with us today. One of the people whose theoretical writing and life choices inspired us was Angela Davis. Our student organization, the United Coalition Against Racism, invited Angela to come to Michigan and speak in 1989. I don't know if you remember. And she imprinted in my mind. She not only accepted our invitation, but she visited our rather modest center to learn about the kind of organizing we were doing. That's when I first met Angela and learned she was not just a celebrity or a symbol of 60s radicalism, but had deep political commitments and moral conviction. It's interesting, our experience with her was in stark contrast to what happened just a year later after Nelson Mandela was released from captivity. He was touring the US, and several student activists, along with other various interest groups, were invited to meet with him in small group settings in Detroit right before his his major address in Tiger Stadium. He was running late, so he skipped the meeting with the activists so he could meet with the business and corporate leaders. But we need a whole other conference to talk about that. We learned from Angela Davis that we cannot silo our struggles. Solidarity is not simply you support my struggle and I support yours. Instead, it is understanding that what happens in Palestine is tied through power and protest to what happens in Ferguson. That if we truly care about transformation, we cannot be selective about whose freedom we fight for. As we think about the kind of backlash and repression that people are facing today because of supporting a free Palestine, it would be helpful to remember that the Black freedom struggle faced and continues to face similar challenges. Repression from state actors, university corporate leaders, and vigilante groups were and are a part of daily life for Black activists. People were murdered, harassed, intimidated. Military troops have been deployed against the Black Lives Matter protests, and the movement for Black Lives has been infiltrated by the FBI and has encountered other forms of oppression. Angela lost her job in the 1960s and was imprisoned. She, like many other people, continue to have invitations withdrawn because of her position on Palestine. Palestinian solidarity is part of our broader anti-colonial, anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and feminist vision. Many people here have gone to Palestine on delegations and witnessed firsthand the brutality and the dehumanization of occupation. I joined with Barbara, Angela, Gina Dent, Beverly Guy Sheftel, Chandra Mahante, and others on a Women of Color delegation in 2001. We were a diverse group, some who grew up in the Jim Crow South.
2011.
What did I say? I meant 2011. She's always correcting people. We were a diverse group, some who grew up in the Jim Crow South or under South African apartheid. We had an indigenous feminist who was living with the ongoing reality of US settler colonialism, and delegation members who carried with them immigrant histories that could be traced to US imperialism. I think I can say for all of us that what we witnessed was so much more than we had imagined. My experiences living under South African apartheid did not prepare me for what I saw in Palestine. We drove through militarized checkpoints, were questioned and searched. Our bus was stopped and boarded by soldiers with assault rifles and vicious-looking German shepherds. But what we experienced paled in comparison to what Palestinians experience every day. We visited Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem, and we met an 88-year-old woman who was forcibly evicted in the middle of the night, only to see settlers move into her home a few hours later. We met families whose children had been administratively detained for months without charge. We met farmers who had been separated from their land by a 25-foot wall. The ongoing attacks on Gaza are part of a larger history of illegal occupation. Despite this moment of trauma, we cannot lose sight, however, of the power of resistance. Our students embody this, as do the millions of people around the world marching and engaging in direct action. Our keynote conversation today with Barbara Ransby and Angela Davis are part of that Black radical feminist tradition, which has been at the forefront of social justice and global liberation. They are visionaries and intellectuals, but they have also been in the trenches. They have unparalleled integrity and are never afraid to speak the hard truth. They write with political astuteness, governed not by political expediency or personal benefit, but by their moral compass. Perhaps most important is their unwavering and steadfast commitment to organizing and social justice. And to see people who have devoted their entire lives to making the world a better place is indeed inspiring. So together, they're going to share their political wisdom, offer their thoughts about the Black radical tradition, and to address the question of Ella Baker's legacy for this moment. So please help me in giving them a warm welcome.
Is it working? Yes? Yes. Wow. Thank you, Premilla. So I would have no home training whatsoever if I did not say a lot of thank yous, but I can't say enough thank yous. Someone said earlier that Ella Baker didn't get a lot of accolades in her life, and she didn't. And it actually wasn't that important to her. I think she felt rewarded by the knowledge that she lived a life of integrity, and she knew she made a difference in so many people's lives. But it is, as somebody who spent, I don't know, 15 years, researching all these little details about this person's life and trying to tell her story, it is, I think, tribute and a proper tribute to her that so many organizers are interested in her life story, and the book has made a contribution. So thank you all for coming here to talk about and learn about Ella Baker today. And many of you in this audience I know who are very much living in Ella Baker's tradition. And I had the honor to have, in a sense, a perfect subject. So, people say, thank you for writing this. I mean, what a life, what a gift to a biographer to have a life that's so worth telling, a life story that's so worth telling. So I feel really honored and humbled to have been her biographer, and that today's celebration. And then the very kind things that people have said about me, I appreciate it very much. I think one of Mariam Kaba said this. She's still here? Yeah. I met Mariam when she's speaking of people you meet when they're 18. I know no one thinks Mariam Kaba was ever 18, but because she's like the wise woman of the movement. So she has all these things that she says, but one of those things is hope is a discipline, which is very true. And that anything worth doing is something that you're doing with other people. And that's very much in the spirit of Ella Baker. And so I think this convening, to feel the strength of community around a set of values, to hear this whole room chant Free Palestine, to feel the strength of so many people. And I'll just say from my life, and I'll stop. Just so many different phases of my life. I want to thank Premilla and Sarah and Jafari for putting this together. I know that a lot of love and time went into it, taken away from other things. My long relationship with Premilla, I truly treasure it on so many levels. I really do appreciate it, and your staffs, all the people who traveled to be here, and it's some really busy people who traveled to be here. I thank you so much for making time for Ella and for me to the degree. I know this session is really big because of my friend here, who. But I think we're both pleased to see such a wonderful turnout for this conversation. And I also want to thank my family. We mentioned Asha. If you're watching, Asha, we love you. We miss you. Your spirit is in the room. I want to also thank my son, Jason, who joined us on the Women of Color and Indigenous Women of Color delegation to Palestine, and was, the remarkable principled male participant in that. He was also detained when we were going through the Allenby Bridge. And Peter, of course, my partner of many, many decades, 40 some decades, 40, no, not 40. I'm tired. 40 years. It's a long day. It's a long day. It's a long day. Anyway, and all of you, and for the students, the JVP and SJP students who stood up here before, I thought, that was the highlight. That really was. But anyway, to all my comrades, thank you. So enough thank yous. We appreciate you. Let's appreciate each other, and let's savor and treasure this community and build on this going forward. It's also my Chicago crew who's here. Appreciate y'all coming. Appreciate y'all coming. So we're gonna have a conversation, and she knows this, and I don't want to embarrass her like people are embarrassing me, but Angela has meant so much to so many of us and has meant so much in my life, and there have been phases to what that. She was first a beautiful face on a button and a t-shirt and a poster. She was then a larger story and a politic that I very much identified with. Then I met her once in 75 or so. You were wearing a beautiful long shawl, and I was sitting on the floor, and I looked up and said, "I admire you." And you said, "Other people did all the work." I was like, "Oh, she's humble too." But she's become a comrade. She's become a comrade and a dear friend, and we've had fun together, and I think learned and grown together. And that you would make time to be here with me today, I think is very special. And thank you, and I love you. Sorry, Gina.
Oh, now it's working. Now it's working. Okay. I love you, Barbara. This has been a phenomenal one-day symposium. I was sitting there trying to figure out what we're going to talk about. I've been so moved by everything that has happened. And of course, I love hearing these amazing tributes to Barbara, and I like to watch her put her head down like this. I was just thinking, I wish I could be sitting down there right now. I made a couple of notes, which if they will come back on my computer, just a few, and then we'll proceed with it. But I wanted to say first that there are ideas that resonate during the time in which they are produced. And then there are ideas that have to wait until history catches up with them. And then sometimes history catches up with those ideas because there are those who organize, advocate, discuss, study, teach, mobilize. Barbara always recognizes this dynamic. And so she writes, speaks, teaches, organizes, and mobilizes, drawing from her analyses of the past, while always deeply inhabiting the present, and inhabiting the present by trying to build foundations for a more habitable future. And I think that that is why she decided to study Ella Baker, why she devoted 15 years to researching Ella Baker, because there was a kind of prescience that if in the first decades of the 21st century, that is to say, if we did our work at the end of the 20th, because I met Barbara in the 70s and then the 80s, that Black women would surge forward in the movement. And not simply Black women in this country, but all over the Americas and all over the world. And when Black women rise, we bring everyone else with us. And so Barbara knew that this is what Ella Baker was struggling for. Not a change in the gender of leadership, but a change in the structure of how we do our work. that we needed to learn how to do 3 things simultaneously, or 5 things, and that we needed a capacious conception of who we are and where we find ourselves, so that we would learn how to make kinship, make relations of kinship across oceans. So I met Barbara when she was a graduate student, and she was studying and organizing on the campus of the University of Michigan. I also met Tracy. I also met Premilla. And I was struck by her powerful presence, not a bombastic presence, but just by the enormous amount of respect among students and faculty and others. So I'm a good 14 years older than Barbara. Is it 14 or 24?
No, it's not.
Sometimes my math doesn't quite come out right, but because you were born in the late 50s.
I'm 66 and you're 79.
How old are you?
66.
You're
You're 79.
70.
13 years older than me.
Okay. Oh, see, she wants to make it last, yeah. But the point I was making by evoking our respective ages is that I quickly learned that I could learn a great deal, from this young graduate student who was doing all of this incredible organizing on the campus at the University of Michigan. And so I quickly acquired a deep, deep respect for her leadership and for the questions that she asked. But then over the years, there was a time when I thought I could only talk politics with Barbara. And then
Others say that.
and then I learned that we could relax together, we could laugh together, and then Beverly Guy Cheftal said, "Oh, when I was in such a place, I went shopping with Barbara." And I said, "Barbara's never invited me to go shopping." And so not only have we gone shopping together, but I have a lot of clothes from her closet in my closet at home. And I learned how to laugh with Barbara and how to cultivate and seek a deep measure of aesthetic pleasure. And I did not know that about Barbara initially. I thought she was.
I thought I was so serious, you said.
Well, people say the same thing about me. When I first got out of jail and I would go to a party wanting to dance, people would corner me and try to have a political conversation over the music. So I guess that's the way I approached you. I really treasure all of the times that we get to take a little time off, but Barbara never takes time off because there's always like, "Oh, I have an emergency meeting," and somebody like Mo or somebody is calling and needs to have a conversation, but that's okay. Yeah.
I mean, I think someone asked the question earlier about joy, and I think for this generation, and I can be kind of a hard ass sometimes about, Carissa said, I didn't want to do the exercises, but I've loosened up, You have. I've loosened up.
I can attest to that. You have.
I have loosened up. And I think part of the lesson, we're relaxing now at the end of you all thought we were going to have this intense deep. We're going to talk about some serious things, but I do think it's important that we have that joy and levity. And also part of building relationship with people is vulnerability, you know, like to hang out with Angela Davis and she's doing flips in the water or whatever you were doing. We were traveling, you know, is humbling. It's like, you know, extraordinary people can be ordinary and ordinary people can be extraordinary. And it's a wonderful lesson about humanity and how much we can accomplish that we don't think we can accomplish, and how, you know, people with, you know, quirks and all the kinds of things that the rest of us have also make history. You know, I think that's a big lesson from Ella Baker too, you know, that she said every contact with another human being, you get some value from it. And so she had this enormous capacity to, and I'm looking at Lenore Tate Magubani there, who knew Ms. Baker very well. She had this enormous capacity to appreciate us in all of our multiple dynamics. And that's and that's what I've learned also from you and, you know, the leading thinkers and practitioners of abolition. And I've told you, heard me tell this story before of, you know, that you don't throw anybody away, that we don't pigeonhole anybody and we don't throw anybody away. And that human beings have enormous capacity to change, to grow, to rethink, including us. So, you know, so I see a continuum from us, from our friendship deepening and seeing different aspects of one another, to also seeing different aspects of people we organize with, and sometimes not in agreement, full agreement with, who also change, you know. And I don't know, you know, that in this world, in the seriousness of Gaza, I'm telling you, this has been a beautiful day with all this. This has been heavy, heavy, heavy on our hearts, you know, that, and I have this terrible habit of watching CNN and MSNBC, which can throw you into a deep, deep depression. But seeing the horrible, horrible scenes of the bombing of Gaza and the low moral bar, that people can look at that and not be outraged, that you know, politicians who, you know, we know what they're about, right? We know that they're about racial capitalism, but it's like they usually put up a facade that they care about some shit, but now it seems like it's kind of gone. And so that stands to me in juxtaposition to this, which I feel the full and richness of a humanist movement, a generous movement, a love-filled movement, as Damon likes to say. I don't know, did I drift? We're not on script here, as you can tell.
No,
I want to ask you a couple questions.
okay, but hold on for a
Okay.
second. Because I think, you know, what you just said about how painful this moment is makes me recognize the extent to which people have worked so hard to create this sense of solidarity with Palestine. This doesn't happen. I mean, I noticed as soon as we got the news about the bombing of Gaza, I could feel it in the pit of my stomach as soon as they started the bombing, and I was thinking that it's been a while since we've had those feelings collectively, because we didn't necessarily express ourselves in this way during the Iraq War or Afghanistan. And I remember during that period thinking, when we were active in the anti-war movement during the Vietnam era, we had feelings, we had collective feelings for people who were struggling in Vietnam. And then it seemed as if they went away. So you know, that period of the 80s, and well, there was South Africa, which was powerful, but the 90s, I really thought we had lost our capacity to generate those collective emotions. And And here we are. And I thank you so much, Barbara, for guaranteeing that justice for Palestine is always on our minds. That is a through line in whatever we do.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people in this room that guarantee that, including you. She deflects to other people, because we made a commitment. First of all, on the bus on our delegation, and I'm looking at Robin Kelly, who catches a lot of flack for saying Palestine, and they invite Robin to talk about a book from 10 years. And Robin said, this talks about Palestine. To talk about climate justice, Robin said this talks about Palestine. So I think there's ways, but when we were on our delegation, we made a commitment to talk about Palestine. And there was a time when I had that as a mechanical thing in every talk. I'd get asked to talk about Ella Baker, and I'm like, at the end, I would say something about Palestine, or at the beginning. And you are an exemplar of that, because you get asked to do a lot of stuff a lot of times, right? Mm-hmm. And you say yes a lot of time, and and I think we don't appreciate that sometimes, including selfies and all this other stuff that surrounds being who you are, but that Palestine has been a commitment that you've taken so seriously. I think then the rest of us feel like we have to step up, that you set that example, and it's a very powerful one, and we don't want to embarrass you by not stepping up also, so we step up.
But I didn't do that by myself.
I know. No, we didn't do it alone.
I mean, every single step of the way, it's always been about making community. It's always been about relationships. It's always been about ideas that reflect our many conversations and discussions. And I don't know, maybe I sound like a broken record.
Sound what?
Like a broken record?
No.
We don't have records anymore, do we? It's always important to remind yourself where you are in history.
I wanted us to come back a little bit to our delegation, and Premilla said some of the highlights of it, of going to Sheikh Jarrah and all the things that we had sort of read about. But one part of that delegation too, in terms of you and political prisoners, and we see this now. I mean, one of the aspects of this moment of crisis is foregrounding a lot of stuff that is routine, like the routine violence of occupation, the routine violence of settler colonialism. It is foregrounding, because a lot of people who are being released from Israeli prisons are in administrative detention. Gina mentioned we met with Adamir when we were there, which is an organization that works with the families of people who are imprisoned in Israel. And people resonated with Angela as having been a political prisoner, and many of that generation had pictures of you, had posters of you in their cells, so you were that bridge. And I know, this is a complicated thing, as we're talking about celebrity and all this. It's not like you emerged into a historical moment, and some of that you didn't choose, like to get fired and thrown in jail. That wasn't your agency. That was somebody else's agency. But then what you did with that for the last many decades is what is admirable and appreciated in your agency, is to say, I'm going to use that platform to open up space for these conversations. And I'm going to say things that maybe other people can't even say, that are unpopular, and raise issues. When you talk about Palestine in spaces people don't expect you to, it travels. And so we saw that in Palestine, that people had, there was a legibility of the Black freedom movement, partly through your story and example. But that was a very powerful memory for me.
And also attests to the power of internationalism.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of us in the room who would identify as socialists. I mean, I know we want to see racial capitalism
ended,
banished from history.
Yes, you can applaud that.
And so I think it's important to identify that the internationalism that has always been associated with communist movements and movements against capitalism. And it was that internationalism that was responsible for the movement that led to my freedom. And this is why, like you said, this is why I always say, it's never been about me. I could do whatever I did. And if people, whatever I've done, whether it's important or not, but without large numbers of people collectively taking on the task of accomplishing something that so many people thought could not be accomplished, because Nixon called me a terrorist, and they all said that I needed to go to the gas chamber, and people all over the world said no. And it's important for me, not because I was a beneficiary, and that's all I was, really, the beneficiary, but I mean, I may have made some other contributions at other
Maybe
times,
so. Maybe so.
But what's important, I think, is the building of that vast movement that accomplished something that so many people thought was absolutely impossible.
Right.
And that's the only reason why I continue to evoke that.
You're paying that back for, when did you get out of jail?
In 1972.
And you've done a lot of stuff since then.
Well,
paying it back.
Yeah.
To the world.
Yeah, and
clap for that
too. Okay,
yeah, you let that go. So we wanted to talk too just about the significance of what's happening in Gaza, but also this political moment. And I feel you said, and a number of people said in the discussions about the importance of Black left feminism, and the wonderful book that you and Beth and Eric and Gina wrote, Abolition Feminism Now, which gives us a genealogy and the connection between abolition and feminism. But I think we also see opposition to settler colonialism when we evoke the names of all the people, including Audre Lorde and June Jordan and Barbara Smith and you and many others, who have spoken out against settler colonialism and solidarity with the Palestinian struggle for many years. And some of us came to it through the anti-apartheid movement, the anti-South African apartheid movement. And Omar Barghouti actually was a student here who is, headed up the BDS movement, was a student here when we were organizing anti-apartheid work. But the role of Black feminism and the importance of it in this moment. And I would also add the other F word, which keeps me up at night, which is fascism, which is a threat of new forms of fascism in this moment. We could talk about what that means. This is not full-blown fascism, because we wouldn't all be up in here like this. But there is a threat of a new form of fascism, and fascism always comes in various forms. So the importance of feminism, the threat of fascism, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, or where we can go down that road.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why we are so passionate about guaranteeing that this movement in solidarity with Palestine is not subject to the kind of repression that is happening on this campus.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, we see Robin mentioned that, and I know there's a lot of people here from lots of different schools, but on my campus, UIC, just last week, we formed Faculty for Justice in Palestine. And when I left, there was a 3-day process of putting up 15,000 white flags, which symbolize the deaths in Gaza. And a negotiation, if you will, with the administration to not take them down right away. And people had read the names, all the names that they could pull together as a symbolic thing. And I think having the formation of Faculty for Justice in Palestine, taking the lead and the leadership of our students is an important intervention that we can all make in this moment, and not to see it as something else. And the other thing, I was on a, I don't know, I think, well, you were on another panel with them, but I was, I was on Black Feminist Futures did a panel, which had not only talking about Palestine, but also talking about Congo and Haiti and Stop Cop City in Atlanta. So programs like that, and the mighty Mary Hooks.
Mary
How
Hooks,
did I
yeah.
blank on her name? It was, Mary Hooks. And it was a very powerful conversation, making those linkages that these issues are not isolated in an international context of developments we see that threaten in a very, very fundamental way people's survival, that are highly repressive and militaristic. The threatened military reinvasion of Haiti that keeps coming up. So I think having programs that link these issues is also a critical intervention we can make in this time.
Yeah, and let's talk for a moment about ways in which we might encourage a broader sense of the meaning of this effort to generate solidarity with people in Gaza and in Palestine. I was thinking today, and some other people have talked about, I think it was Mariam was talking about, what it was like participating in movements of support of Palestine back in the day. I mean, I remember back in the 70s when you would go to an event on campus, and it would be the Palestinian students, it would be the Muslim Student Union, and then just a sprinkling of other people. And I say this because I think it's so important for us not to underestimate where we are and what we represent. On a campus like Columbia, where you have an administration that is dedicated to making it impossible for people to gather freely and exchange ideas about what needs to be done to stop the violence and the genocide in Gaza. You sometimes become a little myopic, and you can forget that the reason they're so repressive in the first place is because they never imagined that they would see anything like this. They never imagined that there would be a Jewish organization, standing together with the Students for Justice in Palestine and leading the way for all of us. That is very threatening, and so I think I guess I'm older than you are, Barbara.
By 13 years.
But I guess the older I get, the more I realize, I think, how important it is to have a historical consciousness. And to remind people that things were not always this way. I can remember after, in relation to our visit to Palestine, we were talking about what we could do to, and Robin and all of the other delegation members, because there were quite a few delegations around that time. How to bring Palestine onto social justice agendas, because always it was. I've been active in Palestine solidarity for a long time, but it was always all of the other issues over here, and then Palestine was by itself. And so one of the things we decided that we would dedicate ourselves to, and Beverly really took this seriously, is how to guarantee that Palestine becomes the center of social justice agendas. And so, Beverly did that really hard work on an HBCU of, you still have your job, but I guess, I guess they can't touch you now. But speaking back to presidents in public meetings and supporting the creation of a chapter of Students for Justice for Palestine on Spelman's campus. So if we think about all of the work that has been done in the last, say since the first decade of the 21st century, and the changes that have happened, it's really remarkable. I would have never imagined sitting in Columbia in a space like this with, so many people speaking out in the, I'm just saying that let's not forget to take note of where we've been, where we are, and
where we can go.
Where we can go.
That's right.
And she reminds us of this all the time.
I think there is a balance to strike. There's that Gramsci quote, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. And, in this moment, I think that is a balance that we seek to strike. And I think when people talk about protracted struggle, that's what, and you talk about, having this sort of, not just intergenerational, like we're different generations in the same moment, but like after we're like thinking of there's a struggle that will continue after we're no longer here. And to feel invested in that, like it can't happen before I clock out. No, it's going to continue after some of us, after all of us clock out, it's going to continue, to have that long range view of struggle, but also to have that balance between the pessimism, like never, Cabral's quote, "No, tell no lies, take no easy victories," because sometimes the movement does the victory dance and we ain't won nothing yet, So, but then sometimes we can't celebrate what we have accomplished and also feel strengthened, not just celebrate, but feel, I think what you're saying is we feel strengthened by what has been accomplished, and not to feel that things are static, or not to feel it as inadequate as they are now, that there was a time that we weren't as strong as we are now on critical issues, and yet we still have work to do. Right?
Yeah. I mean, we still have a long, long way to go.
Yeah.
But we're not where we were even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And if we can keep that balance, then that means that we can keep moving toward a different kind of future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the reasons I asked that question of the panel before that they didn't answer was when I think of where we are now that we weren't before. I mean, the representation there of Mo. Is Mo still here? No, he's gone. Okay, he's gone organize another FP chapter somewhere. But that this whole arena of radical electoral politics, the potential for that, the limits of that, we see that in Chicago right now. We have a progressive mayor that was elected, but is breaking our hearts a little bit. But also what, Asha and Damon and other people who worked on that campaign remind me is it wasn't just about getting a person elected. So we're learning through these new movements, different ways of even assessing the progress, right? There's progress even when it looks like there's been a setback. The base building work and the creative movement lab that, Carissa is a part of is generating all kinds of ideas about how we can really build a base. Because I think one of the things the nonprofit industry has done to our movements is allow us to focus more on funders than on our people. And the beauty of where relationships happen is, somebody mentioned we're up at night in Michigan having these meetings, is when you look over at somebody and you like, this human being has chosen to be here at 11 o'clock at night with me to have this conversation about how to divest from South Africa, or how to, be in solidarity with Gaza or something. It's a choice. It's not a paid job. It's not a, an assignment. It is a choice. And that validates some sense of connection and respect and friendship, I think, that is part of what building movements, particularly mass movements, base building movements, is about. So that is something I think about when I think about where we are, like what kind of lessons of organizing have we learned, and how do we see that manifest? The other thing I do want to say is, someone talked about mentorship, and like us as mentors, because we're older. But I think mentorship comes both ways, right? When I went to Ferguson to interview people for the 2018 book, I asked them about people who had come from elsewhere. And this is in the book. And and Al Sharpton had just come. And so the young people were like, no, we didn't like Al Sharpton. He was trying to tell us what to do. And I said, well, Angela Davis also came. How was that? It's like, yeah. And they're like, is she older than him? And, because they said, she came, but she didn't try to mold us and scold us, was one of the young, she came and talked to us and listened to us. And so it's like, how do we, because we're not elders, we're yeldas, we're young elders. We're not, but how do we go into intergenerational spaces, and how do we, how are we open to receive knowledge from younger people, and how do we humbly offer both the knowledge of what we've done right and the things that we messed up on, which, sometimes we can't, sometimes harder to do.
Well, it's important to make mistakes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think that we often learn more from the mistakes that we make than we do when we get it right.
Yeah.
Because
but it's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, but that's the only way to do it. And that's the struggle for freedom. You never get it right the first time. If you got it right the first time, we wouldn't be here today.
Freedom is a constant struggle.
It's a constant struggle. Yeah. And maybe that's what freedom is. Learning how to struggle differently, because each time we achieve what might be considered a goal, there's something else there. And as a matter of fact, in the process of winning those victories, we discovered that there was so much more that we didn't even bring to the table. So how do we do that? I mean, I keep thinking now, I don't know, maybe it was because I was talking to Diane, who and Becky, who were reminding me that I once said, okay, I think I just want to work with dogs. Yeah. But I think we do have to extend ourselves beyond human beings, beyond what we know as humanity, because the world is so much vaster than what we as a species have accomplished. As a matter of fact, a lot of animals have done a much better job of preserving this earth while they inhabit it, whereas human beings have only destroyed it. With the exception of indigenous people, and this is why indigenous struggles to create solidarity with indigenous people is so important, because that's about a way of inhabiting this earth without destroying it and imagining its future. And its future does not have to absolutely cannot be a capitalist future.
Right.
So, what I appreciate is like extending and extending, and even when you think that you can't extend yourself anymore, you have to, because new issues come. Who would have thought we would be, talking about pronouns and, like 15, 20 years ago? Who could have predicted
Yeah.
the centrality of the movement on behalf of trans and non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, and how that has opened up worlds for so many people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, just, I mean, the last point, I mean, just gender nonconforming folks to interrogate binaries, right, invites us into thinking about that on so many different levels. But back to what you were saying also about the environment and the non-human animal world, kind of makes me come back. You and I had, I don't know, I did get published. You and I wrote an article on Stop Cop City.
it did get published.
It did get published, yeah. We wrote an article
Because
on
some
that.
of our articles don't get published.
No, or sometimes you don't know where.
Yeah.
But the unity between the abolitionist forces who didn't want this $90 million, I think it is, maybe it's still not built yet. They're still working on it. Military borrowing from the IDF, COP facility outside Atlanta, and want to destroy this beautiful forest. So these issues come together of the environmental justice forces and the abolitionist forces against the expansion of carceral apparatuses, coming together. And, that movement, those folks are up on some serious, serious charges. Why is that movement such a threat? Why is that movement such a threat? Because it brings together two critical sets of forces that are pinpointing points of vulnerability for racial capitalist regimes in this moment, right? Because there is no capitalist resolution to the climate crisis and to the environmental crisis. The mindless growth, green capitalism is an oxymoron. The constant growth strategy and logic of capitalism is destroying the planet, and you can't get around it. Like, if they do what they do, right? If they do what they do, they're going to continue to destroy the planet. It's hardwired.
Well,
So that's
why
one
they
thing.
have SpaceX, and I mean that's
What?
why they're traveling to other.
Oh, they're trying to get out of Dodge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
No,
trying
absolutely.
to find other planets to colonize.
Right. But that combined with, what's been the principal focus of your work and Gina's work and so many others, is to attack the carceral apparatuses of the state. Sometimes that gets watered down and people are like, we just don't like prisons and jails. But prisons and jails are part of the glue that holds together a racial capitalist regime. Because when you're forcing unjust laws down people's throats, what do you do with them when they rise up? What do you do with them when they stop obeying unjust laws? If you don't have prisons, you're in a jam. So those two critical issues coming together in Stop Cop City is why we all have to support those folks who are up on charges, because also the repression. They are. We were at a reading in Chicago, and one of the lawyers from People's Law Office, Jan Sussler's shop, was talking about the charges, and as they read the charges, it said something like, people who are engaged in social activity that support other activities toward social justice, something like, it was this really vague connection, like people who support the right thing, people who support justice in the world. This becomes criminalized because the people who are up on the RICO charges are the people who supported. Am I talking too fast? Okay. Are the people who, who supported the forest protectors and the people who were opposing. So, just imagine, right? You sign a petition, and this is how fascism begins to work. The people under McCarthyism, in dictatorships around the world, you sign a petition, your name is on a list, and those of us who've known people who've lived under dictatorships around the world know that's a real thing. People come for you, and we are not in a bubble here. And if Trump has told you anything about his plans, and this mass movement that he has that is so dangerous and armed, it is about some version of fascism. It's not Mussolini's Italy or Franco's Spain or Hitler's Germany, but it is a form of fascism, right? And so we need to take that serious. I feel like I need to speak more positively about our power, but we need to define the problem seriously and then embrace our power and our resilience and our creativity to write a different future.
Well,
And-
Barbara,
yeah.
well, yes, let's applaud that. Since we're talking,
Okay. Did I get off track?
no, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, this leads me to a question that I want to pose to you. And this is a real serious question.
Okay.
What do we do in 2024? Because if I'm feeling the way I feel about Biden,
I know.
how is everybody else feeling, and where do we do? What do we go? How do we behave in this electoral period? So I've always come to you with these questions.
Well, I don't think there's an easy answer. And probably people in this room have ideas. How many people have ideas about what we should do? And not that many. I know this is an opinionated, engaged crowd, and you're like, we don't know. So here's my thing. I think we do have to defeat the right. I think voting is never all that you should do. If that's all you're doing, you're being lame, okay? Because that never gets us very far. But sometimes, you have to have, and I know very little about sports, but many sports, and my son will tell me if I'm off track here, there's an offense and a defense, right? And so in some ways, voting can be a defensive gesture. I didn't vote for Biden the first time. I don't know who I have voted for in a sense of enthusiastically saying that's my guy. But I voted against the other one who would be worse. And when people say lesser of two evils, it can be literally two evils, somebody who's going to beat you up, somebody who's going to shoot you. So I'd rather get beat up than shot, because then I can come back and fight some more. But there's talk of alternatives. I mean, there are people who are in the trenches of electoral work who have different strategies. I was on a call, which I won't name names, and I wasn't that convinced, but about what would it mean to challenge Biden in the primary with a progressive candidate who might not be able to win, but who could raise issues. But I think all these things are worth talking about. But you know what I think is worth talking about even more is building a movement, because we've seen time and again politicians who hate us, politicians who you would not convince in normal times. If people are in the street, if there's a movement, if there's something that even in their mind, I just have to contain and limit this, they'll talk to you. Campus administrators who won't talk to you one week when you have a movement and have students taking over the campus, all of a sudden they want to talk about all kinds of things, So I think, I'm not trying to evade the question, or maybe perhaps I am. But when I ask myself that question, I keep coming back to these other bigger questions that we have to wrestle with.
But a lot of us know how to put clothespins on our nose and then go in and not even look while we know how to do that.
Yeah.
But if we're feeling that way, what must
other people be feeling? Yeah.
Masses of people be feeling now? And how do we develop the kinds of organizing strategies that will take us somewhere else?
Yeah. Well, somebody mentioned, we've had a lot of convenings in Chicago, and somebody mentioned the Power to the People convening. I think that was one. You might have been out of the country, because I'm always begging you to come to something in Chicago in the winter.
And I always come unless there's like a pressing reason why I can't.
We had that, and it was before the 2016 election, and there were people felt like, I'm not voting for Hillary Clinton. I don't like Hillary Clinton if she gets elected, right? And didn't feel in the primary, weren't going to vote for her. And it was partly predicated upon they're both bad, this, that, and the other. And I do think it comes, again, it's how we see voting. It's not an expression of who we actually are and what we actually believe. It's to determine who we're going to be opposing. Who said this? Derek, I think, before. It's like, what is our next problem? It's choosing our next opponent. And so, again, I think we have close friends from Uruguay who lived under a dictatorship and were in prison. So there is a thing of when you live under certain kinds of regimes, it shifts you into defensive mode and movements because you're just trying to keep your comrades from getting killed and out of jail. And doing a more proactive movement about social transformation becomes more difficult. So do not say I don't support Biden. It turns my stomach what he's saying now. I don't know what that ballot is going to look like. It is a choice that we're going to have to make. The bigger choice is, are we going to build a movement or, rely on whatever the Democrats do, which we know is going to be bad either way.
Yeah,
That's the best I got.
I know. And
Is there people out here do electoral work? Yeah. How y'all feel? Nobody owning it. It is, the campaigns and I have only recently started to do some of this more. And, I listen to somebody like Rashida Tlaib, who we know, who has been so under fire. And her voice is so important in this moment, partly because it exposes the moral degeneracy of so many of her colleagues who are refusing to speak out on what is so obviously a case of ethnic cleansing and genocide in Palestine. And so, I see some value in ways that I didn't before of having voices in there. It's not because I believe in the system. It's not that I believe we're going to vote our way to freedom under the current formula. But I do think the terrain of struggle is important. What do you think?
Well, yeah, of course. But I don't know. For some reason, this feels different to me.
Yeah. And to her too.
Because I've always advocated that, always tried to do it. I mean, I've never voted for anyone that I really wanted to be.
Believed in.
But I raised that in connection with your evocation of fascism. Because it seems as if we might be even closer to the possibility of fascism re-entering the White House. If we don't figure out some strategy to attract people to the polls and to our movements, of course.
Here's the other thing, and I know there's people watching, but we're talking to a room of friends and comrades, so we'll think out loud together. The other thing I think about with particularly Trump and Trumpism and the nature of this movement is that it will make a difference if Trump is reelected or a Trumpist candidate is reelected. But we're in a serious challenge, even if they're not, which is January 6th was an event. Either it's going to be a invigorated movement behind him and going through semi-legitimate channels to, as he said, what did he say? I'm going to wipe out all the vermin, all the Marxists and communists, and a lot of us would have those labels on us, right?
And a lot more people are standing with him now.
Yes. So there's that, doing that through official channels with all the authority of the state, or these insurgent militias like we saw January 6th claiming that the election was illegitimate and orchestrating some sort of violent intervention there. That, I think that's also a threat, because there's a lot of very small decisions that were made around January 6th that could have turned out very, very different. And that was him losing, right? What is the threat of, him losing still poses a threat of a continual ascendant fascist movement. So the fascist threat is not going to be just defeated at the polls. We got to do that hearts and minds work. We got to talk to people we disagree with. We got to organize our people. And I want to, can I say something slightly off this question? But in terms of organizing, like one of the things I do feel sometimes with our movements is that we become a little bit insular. And I think Mariam said, we should talk to our friends and our uncles and our people where we are. And I believe that, and we should avoid that. But we also have to go into create open spaces and talk to people we don't know. You know what I mean? And there are still barbershops, actually. So you can go, and we had a program in Chicago. Do you remember we talked about this once when we had something called the Public Square, and we created community conversations about social justice issues, and we did them in barbershops. And we did them in church basements, and we did them in public libraries, and we did them in all these places. And, you know, like you have a meeting like this, random people show up with all kind of questions and confusions. It's like Freedom Square. Damon said, this is the movement with the doors wide open, and all kind of people come in all different levels of trauma and everything else. But it's some of that organizing also has to happen, especially when you're talking, and Mo talks about this with the Working Families Party and electoral work. You got to knock on doors. You don't know who's going to open that door. You got to be willing to have that conversation. That's part of winning, right? And it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't always feel good. But anyway, ¿qué más?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
que viva Puerto Rico.
Right.
So should we take some, what's the time frame, Premilla? Don't take questions. We only have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Three,
Well,
4,
you know,
5 minutes.
I did want to say again, I want to re-emphasize the changes that are happening all over the world.
Yeah.
And particularly with respect to Gaza. You know, just a couple of weeks ago, Gina and Beth and Erica and I were in Brisbane, Australia, for a conference of Sisters Inside. You've met Debbie Kilroy, right? Yeah. And so, you know, you don't expect to go to a place like Brisbane, Australia, and to find people rallying in the streets, calling for justice for Palestine. As a matter of fact, at the conference itself, they had 3 flags on the stage. You know, one of them was the Aboriginal flag of Australia. The other was the Maori flag of Aotearoa. And then there was the Palestinian flag. And virtually everyone who spoke during the course of the conference made some reference to Palestine. You know, millions of people all over the world are standing up in ways that they have never stood up before. And this makes me recognize the degree to which the United States of America is so backwards in terms of, you know, its governmental representation that, you know, I just think it's important to keep emphasizing that so we don't feel so weak, so that we have the strength to do the organizing that we have to do in order to transform conditions here. Because otherwise we'll be in a situation like Germany, whereas, you know, faculty members can't even reveal their names if they support BDS, you know, talking about fascism.
And talk about in Germany.
In Germany, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. And I mean, that's why we love and respect you so much, is that you bring us back to not just what we're up against, but what we're for and who we are, you know, that we can, and we see movements growing and people are building movements around the values that we believe in. And that's a lesson from Ella Baker too. I would say if there's one word from her, is perseverance. you know, against all the nonsense of the NAACP leadership, against
Right.
all the adoration of King, against all the, you know, sort of backtracking of some of the ministers she worked with. And, you know, she persevered. She created new organizational spaces. She built a base. She navigated all kinds of stuff, and she persevered. You know, it was her life's work. She said, I didn't make a living, but I made a life in struggle. So
Yeah, that's
I
beautiful.
take great, you know,
Yes,
great inspiration for
absolutely.
that. Premilla saying it's about time, right? Yeah, is it or no? Okay. And I asked, do you want some last words? Because I wrote a little statement for the November 4th gathering. Yeah, it's sort of a poem. I mean, I'm not a poet, so it's not, I don't want
You don't
to.
have to be a poet to write a poem.
Oh, okay.
Audre Lorde taught us that, didn't she?
Okay. All right, now let me see if I can read it. So I'm not a poet writing a poem. I know some amazing poets. But again, thank you all for, you know, for sort of eavesdropping on this conversation between two radical feminist friends, thinking out loud together. Okay, this I wrote for the November 4th gathering demonstration in DC. And there was a Blacks for Palestine, which Robin Spencer has been a real force for. I mean, it was read at a couple different spaces there. Who are my people in this crucible moment of war and genocide as we witness the dirty process of ethnic cleansing unfold before the eyes of the world? Who are my people as tiny brown children are bombed in southern Gaza as they flee their homes following the evacuation routes prescribed by their bombers? Who are my people as my friend's sister gives birth in a total darkness in Gaza City as incubators are shut down and power is cut off in hospitals throughout the Strip? No food, no water, no fuel, just bombs. In Al-Zahra, whole buildings are leveled. Apartments where families cooked meals, lovers made love, children played games, and girls danced with their friends are all gone now. There is the hole in the heart of the Jabalia refugee camp, and that hole is a bomb crater beneath which unknown and unnamed bodies are entombed. A broken man cradles his daughter, whose little body has also been broken. A woman wails for her lost son. No parts of his body have been found. Who are my people in this crucible moment of violence and destruction in the name of defense? I was born a Black woman. I became a Palestinian, wrote our beloved sister, the radical feminist poet June Jordan. In that simple quote, she interrogates essentialist notions of identity and blood and belonging and challenges us all to be bigger than that. Who are your people? Ella Baker would ask visitors and strangers. Who claims you and who do you claim in this world? And most importantly, who do you stand with in times of crisis and despair? We do not need a DNA test or genealogy search to know who our people are in this moment. If I choose to stand on the side of freedom, my people are the oppressed people of the world. People who are suffering under varied and violent forms of injustice and oppression, from Haiti to Hebron, from Birmingham to Bethlehem, from Shatta prison in northern Israel to Stateville prison in central Illinois. I claim as my people all who are standing up for occupation, against occupation and dispossession, against heteropatriarchy and white supremacy, colonialism and settler colonialism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, environmental pillage, ableism, carceral violence, authoritarianism, and of course, racial capitalism, which undergirds it all. My people are also the truth tellers and freedom fighters of the world. Those speaking in multiple languages, speaking truth to power. Silent vigils by the organization Women in Black on the street corners of Barcelona and Tokyo and Madrid, saying no to war and occupation. Aswat, the queer Palestinian freedom fighters, saying that the liberation of Palestine must also include them. Courageous voices inside the halls of power refusing to be silenced. Rashida, Corey, Ilhan, we are with you because you are with us. And the passionate Jewish protesters that shut down Grand Central Station in New York and then the Statue of Liberty, insisting not in our name, and never again means never again for anyone. Never again means never again for anyone.